August 30th, and we have here with us Gabrielle Sayers. Is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Gabrielle Sayers?
Gabrielle Sayers.
We have to speak up. What's your permanent address?
9152 Coney Branch Road, apartment 104, Silver Spring, Maryland.
And where were you born?
Bethesda, Maryland.
When?
Gee, that's a good November 16th, 1958.
Okay. This tape is for the book that I'm going to call Addict, and I want you to tell me what you would like to have by your page, by your photo, what you think is important that happened in your life, like your childhood, your frustrations, your pain, your addiction, and then your spiritual path today, or whatever you want to talk about. So you have 90 minutes to talk. You can talk for 20 minutes, it's fine, but the tape can go over on the other side.
Okay.
So I can stay in here or I can leave. Okay. Yeah,
I've only been really heavily into women since I've been clean. You know?
Oh, you can talk about that. The tape's going.
Well,
you were born?
I was born in Bethesda. But when you first said that, what it made me think of was when I was 2 years old. Okay, my parents had a cocktail party, and everybody had gone downstairs into the finished rec room to, I don't know, look at some artwork or something that my mother had done because she was an artist. And I went around the party and I like drained all these martini glasses, and I went into my crib and passed out. And my mother came in and she couldn't figure it out, you know. She couldn't wake me up, and it smelled like alcohol, you know. She was really freaked out, and the doctor just said, let her sleep it off, you know. And but that's like my earliest recollection of it, and that's the way I was my whole childhood, just whole hog. I can remember when I was like 8, standing in the hallway looking at my parents in the living room saying, well, nothing but a wino, you know. I remember that, and I used to eat all the vitamins I could get my hands on. If there was like a bottle of vitamins in the cabinet, I ate the whole bottle. I've had my stomach pumped at least 15 times as a child. You know, I never learned. And I was always doing bizarre stuff. I was always hurting myself, you know. And it was really weird because my mother, I really think that my mother was an addict. And she lived in this fantasy world, which was her theater and her poetry and her music. And she created this fantasy environment for me as a child. And that's what I grew up in. I was completely out of touch with reality my entire childhood. And my father was very conservative and strict, and I was terrified of him. So it just reinforced the fantasy environment that I lived in. I had a retarded brother that stole, lied. You know how retarded kids are when you're unsupervised. He was a real pain in the ass. And so I learned all these habits from him. I learned how to lie, how to steal, how to cheat, how not to get caught, you know, because that was the most important thing, because you can't, I learned how to not to lie, so I wouldn't have to, cover myself up, you know, so I became really bold, and I would say, well, there's, you know, they'd say, Gabrielle, where were you this morning? You know, when we checked your room, you weren't in bed. I went out, you know, about 12 o'clock last night, and I fell asleep on the playground, spent the whole night there, you know, and they'd buy it, because they just didn't want to deal with, you know, they just didn't want to go into it with me because I'd be so brazen. You know, I'd stand up to them and just say, fuck you, I don't care what you think. You know? But, it seems like my whole childhood was like this illusion. And, I mean, a lot of stuff went on over the years, you know. Being in and out of the theater, being up all night long, missing school. I would do stuff like, I was very, very sensitive, and I was real creative, and I was real into being straight up, you know. And I would go through these periods of being straight up, and I'd get slapped down. So then I'd just totally go to the other end of the spectrum and just become really sly and devious, and not tell anybody what I was doing, and just totally isolate, spend all my time alone. And I bounced back and forth like this through my first 12 years of life, you know. And when my mom left my father, And I stayed with my father. I freaked out because my dad was just, he thought I was a horrible person, and he never really had anything good to say to me. And I was terrified of him, so there was like no communication between us. So I started leaving home. I left home when I was 12. And I did that for a long time. I would get arrested a lot. My father would say, I'll put her in jail. My mother would come and bail me out. And my mother would she was very dramatic. She always had a young man in tow. She would show up with one of her young men at the police station with white satin dress, floor-length leopard skin coat, and bizarre animals with her and people, and she was really flaky. But I loved that. I liked that flamboyant style she had. So anyway, I got shipped around a lot. I ran away a lot. I spent a lot of time with a lot of different relatives all over the country. My father lost his leg when I was 16, and I remember him laying in the hospital telling me that they were going to amputate his leg. And it was the first inkling I had, I think, in my entire life that he was a human being. Because he started to cry, and I'd never seen him cry. And I thought, geez, he has feelings. And I was so out of touch with feelings. I had been that way my whole life. When my mom left, I started using drugs because I couldn't, to reinforce my fantasy world, I couldn't deal with my father and what he wanted me to be and how he wanted me to act. Since my mom wasn't there to reinforce my previous behavior, I had to he wanted to compel me into this other behavior, and I didn't want to be that way. So I started stealing drugs from people's houses, and I stole a whole bunch of morphine from this doctor down in DuPont Circle when I was a runaway at one point. And when I went back home to my father's house, I had all these drugs, so I started selling drugs in junior high school in 7th grade. And that paid for my habit, my acid. I was real into acid. And that seems to be what my whole teenage life was about, just doing as many drugs as possible, staying out as late at night as possible, avoiding my family as much as possible, avoiding anything to do with the real world. And when I was just before I turned 17, I left home for good, and I became very aware of the fact that I couldn't ever get arrested again because I was responsible for myself, and there wasn't anybody to bail me out anymore. My family was pretty sick of my behavior at that point. I had something that crossed my mind when I was thinking about leaving home. I didn't realize until that point that I was responsible for myself. When I finally took the decision to leave, that's how I've lived my whole life, in these sporadic jumps, these major decisions were made in the spot moment, irrational thoughts. But I never, it was not until that moment that I realized that I had to go out and support myself. I've been raised to believe that everything I wanted was going to be given to me. And what I found out was that I didn't get anything. And that pissed me off. It made me very angry that nobody had prepared me. Nobody had ever dealt straight with me. I was just so fucked up. I had no grip on reality, and I didn't know where to start. So I found some guy to support me. Started working. He was real into race cars. So I hung out with the race car crowd. I went out drinking every single night, hustling drinks in bars because my boyfriend worked at night. And then I'd screw some other guy and I'd be home before he left. I continued that for a long time, for a couple of years. And then I split. I got fed up with him and split. I don't know, it seems like I did that a lot, That's how I got clean. I did that. One day I was like, well, I think it was PMS. I really do. Because so much of my life was like that. One minute I was fine, sedate, on an even keel, and the next minute I was just insane. and ready to leave, and I would do that. I would just, when I left him, I said, take my shit to my mother's, and I got in my car and I left. And I went to Maine, and I stayed there for a long time. I lived with a bunch of bikers in a clubhouse, and I got into motorcycles. And all the old ladies were strippers, so I got into doing that. And I'd gone up there with the intention. I had this one girlfriend that she was a diplomat brat, and when I met her, she'd been a heroin addict when she was 13. She had like a $500 a day habit, what was considered that much dope, because she lived in Thailand and Bangkok. So she got her father thrown out of the foreign service because she just kept getting caught with all these drugs, mandrakes and heroin. So she was one of my very best friends in junior high and high school. And when I went to Maine to see her. And I went to Maine with like 100 rigs, because I was going to like do it up. I was going to shoot some heroin and I was going to have a good time. I was like 18 or 19. And one of the bikers I was staying with found my stash of rigs and broke every single point. I was so pissed off. So I never did shoot any heroin. I mean, it goes on like that. It goes on like that for 6 more years. Just this bouncing around. I mean, it's a great story, you know, all the things that I did, and how I started to shoot drugs. And basically, I think that everything that I did in my life that was self-destructive was precipitated by some big emotional upheaval having to do with my family. When my mother left when I was 12, and when my father and I had that huge fight when I was 16 and I left. And then when my mother died when I was 21, I went into a real heavy depression. And started shooting drugs. And I did that for like the next 6 years. I lost touch with everything. My family disowned me. My lifestyle, I worked for an insurance company, and I got so fucked up that I couldn't work anymore, and I shot all this dope all the time, and I never left my house, my apartment, and I OD'd a lot. And when I finally ran out of drugs and money, like 6 months later, I went through about $15,000. And I had no place to go. I was out on the street. I put all my shit in storage at some person's garage, and I went to stay with some friends of mine. I was pregnant. I had no money. My girlfriend's father paid for my abortion, which was funny because he was the city desk editor for the National Catholic News Conference. So it was pretty bizarre. He was another great enabler for me. I had a lot of enablers. They didn't want to see me suffer. They pay for my shit. Buy me cars. Buy me junk. But then I decided I was going to kill myself. I was so depressed. And I was living in these people's basement, and it was horrible. It was one of the deepest depressions I've ever been in. I've always been very, prone to depression, but I hadn't been this depressed since I was 13 or 14 years old. And so I pretty much decided the next day I was going to go downtown and get a bag of dope and just shoot it up. End it all. I was pretty tired of it. That was weird because I felt like I was stepping off into another world. I was just I was ready to just let go of the trappings I had and just move on. That was just my thought, just to move on. And the next day, this girl called me out of the blue, and she worked for a phone fantasy company. She said, "Come to work with us," and I made cash bucks, and it kept my habit going for another 2 years. It sounds kind of twisted, but I really feel that was my higher power at work in my life. My higher power has been there through everything, all the hell that I've lived, every place that I've been, all the alleys I slept in. I think that that's the only reason I'm still alive is because of my higher power. because there's just so many situations in my life that I should not have lived through. Not just drugs, but I mean being in bad situations, making poor choices, being in the wrong place at the wrong time consistently. And you know, I mean, I never so much had someone put a finger on me. I mean, I was living on the streets when I was a kid, and no one ever touched me. And it was like that my higher power saved me from myself. You know, and even though I just went on with my existence, I went on. And it goes on with like that. There's a lot of circumstances like that that I just seem to go on. You know, when I was ready to quit, something just propelled me forward past that point, you know, past that gap. And one day, I woke up and I was really, you know, I was just in a lot of pain, emotional pain. I was working a straight job. I was out of the escort business. I was out of the phone sex business. I was working as a courier, shooting a bag of dope every day, drinking a lot of booze, living with the one guy, fucking this other guy. And one day I woke up and I felt like there was no hope left. I felt like I had lost touch with my higher power, my guardian angel, the thing that kept me alive for so long. You know, I felt like I was just gone. There was no contact there anymore. You know what I mean? You remember that feeling?
Mm-hmm.
The conscious contact. I felt it was horrible. I left and I went over to my friend's house to buy a bag of heroin. And I was sitting there in the living room, and I was thinking about it, you know, I had been to some meetings with this friend of mine, like the year before, with my ex-husband. And I remembered that what they said about the progressive nature of the disease, which leads you to jails, institutions, and death. I remember these stories that I would hear people. I heard some sick stories in those meetings, and I thought, man, these people are really sick. They're really fucked up, and they talked about ripping off their friends and being hookers and all kinds of shit, you know. And when I was sitting in Frankie's house, I was thinking about my options, which were to continue working as a courier and start working on K Street to make enough money to supply my habit, because I wasn't making enough money to supply my habit and pay my bills. And I was making a lot of money, you know, but it wasn't enough. And I sat there and I thought about that, and I thought about going back to work for the escort agency that I used to run as one of the girls. And I thought, I think my ego got me clean at that point. I couldn't do it, you know. And I went to the phone and I called Kevin W. up, because I worked with him and I knew he was clean. And he was asleep. He got up and he came out and he met me in a meeting. And I started going to meetings. I think Frankie still wonders what happened to me, because I never said goodbye. I was still upstairs. I just left. He still owes me $40 for that bag of dope. But I came to this meeting on K Street at PI. And I was really afraid, you know, and I was really hard and harsh and cold. And, you know, I looked like a hooker. I'd go in a bar and everybody thought I was a hooker, you know, because I just had that hopeless, frustrated look. The next night I went to a meeting up on Connecticut Avenue. And it was an anniversary meeting. Somebody was celebrating a couple years clean time. And it just blew me away. And I got up and I picked up a white chip and I was crying. I couldn't talk to anybody about it, and I could just cry. And I felt like it was just my last chance. My very last chance. And in a way, you know, now that I've been clean for a while, I feel like it was my very first chance. Because today I know what reality is. Today I know what being responsible is, and I know what I have emotions and I have feelings, and I have friends. I'm not alone anymore, and I'm not in the dark. I'm not bricked up in some room, suffocating. I've shut down so many things in my life when I was using. I shut down my creativity and my hope and everything. And at a very young age, I decided that I was never going to lose control of my emotions, lose my temper, let anybody know how I felt. And I never did for 20 years after that. So I missed a lot. I'm bitter. I think I'm very bitter. And I work on that. That's like the hardest thing for me now, is to not be bitter, to be grateful. That's weird. Do you think that's weird to be like at odds like that?
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time I'm pretty positive. I need to be positive. Especially when you live with Mark. Who's not real positive. But I guess that's good for me, because it makes me really grab onto life. Today I still consider suicide. I still think about it depends on where I'm at. If I'm at a spiritual plane, if I'm working on getting in touch with some sort of spiritual aspect of my life, a lot of times I feel like I'm not on the ground anymore, and I've lost my center and my ground, and I feel like I'm just ready to just go off into space, and sometimes I feel like I want to kill myself just to go ahead, just to release and go ahead. And then there's other times I'm feeling sorry for myself, and I just want to kill myself because I need the sympathy. Thank God I don't have to do any of that shit. I don't think I'll ever stop thinking about it. I never stopped thinking about getting high. I ask myself a lot, almost I would say on a weekly basis. I ask myself, if someone, tied me down and offered me a needle full of ready drugs to do, would I do them? And I used to say, well, gee, I don't know. I don't think I should be in the same room with water-soluble chemicals, And today I feel like I know the answer. It's within me, within myself, in my heart. But I still like junkies. I like to hang out with junkies. I like their attitude. I like their extreme isms, I guess. I don't know how you say that. And I don't feel so apart when I'm with other addicts that are recovering. And I feel connected. Living outside of society for so long, for me, it was so destructive. And I'm still real prone to that, to just isolate and live in my own little world and kind of revert back to that fantasy land that I grew up in, that everything's peachy keen and mom and pop are real happy and all that bullshit. It was never really true. I think maybe it was a symptom of middle class America, that everything looked good on the outside and it was all shit on the inside. My family was very into looks. Appearances were everything. And what happened at home, we just didn't talk about. My friends used to gall them because I never lost my temper. I never lost control. I never got too drunk. I never got in trouble for anything because I never got caught. It was like I was so into control. And I learned that from my family. Don't ever show anything. So sick. My friends used to goad me. Just like, God, how are we going to get her? I could go on for hours. It seems like every time I look back then, I see different things. I felt a lot of pain as a child. I was always in the middle because my retarded brother. Protecting him from my family, and protecting him from the kids in the neighborhood, protecting him at school, and protecting myself from ridicule, because you're weird when you're not perfect. I guess that's the way it seems when you're a kid. I think now I can be perfectly weird. You may not be perfect, but you're perfect for me. I love that picture. It's very compelling. What else do you want me to talk about, Chris? Anything?
Done pretty good. I have to edit a lot. I still have to figure out what I'm doing,
Yeah.
just taping people.
There's so many aspects of it, And it's like, how do you want to look at it? Do you want to look at it from before, from after? I feel like my life before is so removed from me now, So I have two viewpoints. I can look at it like the way I looked at it when I was living it, or I can look at it the way I look at it now with information and recovery, and understand it. So it's like feel it or understand it, You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So every time I look at it, I see something different. All the crying out I did as a kid, and all the rejection, which today I understand. I understand where rejection came from. I feel sad for the child that was crying out, for help. But, now it's like when I look at it that way, I don't feel like it's me anymore, because it's not today. Today is the only thing I can handle, really. I have hopes and I plan for the future and stuff like that, but today is where my emotions are centered, And today is where I've got to be constantly vigilant of my behavior right now. Because right now is, I could die right now, Sure, I could die yesterday or tomorrow, but right now is where I'm concerned, It's what's happening in the moment that makes it. I've had a lot of, I feel like I have a lot of drive. And I used to have a lot of dreams. Today, I feel like I've compromised. I've shuffled all my dreams away as unreal, as part of that fantasy existence. Kind of like into the mundane drone syndrome of the daily humdrum existence. That's a new experience too.
I'm gonna call downstairs for you.
Okay. I'd rather talk about today than yesterday anyway. More fun. More positive. Right?
Right.
Right.
So, keep talking about your dream.
My dream. Yeah. Okay. All my dreams are a shit can. I don't even want to. That's what I was leading up to. It seems that my higher power does stuff to me. So I'm like, I almost don't want to talk about it, because a lot of my dreams, that stuff that was just like passing fancies, really totally unrealistic things, have come to pass today. Are real today in my life. Stuff that I never expected to happen. That They were just too far-fetched. So I don't like to really say. Of course, the more grandiose dreams I know will never happen. But you never know. I get surprised on a daily basis. Just continuing. I feel like if I continue to put in, to contribute to the spiritual net that I'm a part of, that I will continue to receive. But that's not really even a condition, because I've always been on the receiving end of that. Comes with a guardian angel. You coming in?
I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay. It's hard to talk to myself.
Is it?
Yeah. Although I do it when I drive down the road all day long, I talk to myself. Not nice stuff though. Mean stuff. It can be real mean. I feel like I talk to my higher power a lot, like they're listening to me all the time, and I feel like they're, I don't want to say they're testing me, but they're teaching me and testing me at the same time. They're giving me experience tests. Does that make sense? And how I come through them, I won't say determines, I guess it just determines my self-worth, It's weird, it's a lot of unformed beliefs I have about my higher power. I believe that my higher power has always been there, has always been loving. I've always been in the heart of my God. Because I've always reached out to them in one way or another. I've always thought spiritual growth. I mean, one of the 70s, it was spiritual growth was LSD. In the 80s, it's the New Age, which is okay. That fits right in with my line of thinking. I feel real safe and centered when I'm surrounded by water, and I feel real in contact. And I get these half-formed ideas when I'm doing that. I get these thoughts. Like I was reading the other day about in this book, which is about Welsh lore and Irish lore, and talks about the birds of Rhiannon, which are really it was the birds of Rhiannon, and then it was this other bird, and this other bird was like the dark side of our minds, the little cynical part of us that says, oh, you don't want to trust this guy, he's really a schmuck, what you want to do is rip him off and take his money, roll his ass, dump him, and get the hell out of town. And it occurred to me when I was reading this book that it was really talking about the good and bad aspects of ourselves, the little voices in our minds that weigh the pros and cons of what's going on a daily basis. But it was written up in the form of, in the book, it was written up that these little pros and cons, these little voices were gods and demons. And that's kind of the way I look at my higher power. As gods, pieces, beings of light. And they're forever enfolding me in their arms. And they're forever enfolding the people that I love that are alive and people that are dead that I still love, that are still there in force and energy because they're in my heart. And when I'm in need, I reach out to my higher power and I say, help me. I don't want to be alone. I need something, I say, I need this. I need a new couch. I need a new work truck. I need a new carpet. I need a new lover. But I don't say it with force, like, give this to me. It's more like, this would be nice. This would make me happy. And sometimes I get it. That's what really freaks me out. Most of the time I get whatever it is in the back of my mind that I've been desiring. And I've never worked for a single one of these things. What I mean by that is I've never cajoled or connived with my higher power, traded or made deals to get what I wanted. It was just laid upon me, put in my path. It was made available to me. Now, I'm not saying that it was free. A lot of times I would have to pay whatever was required, but it was put in my path. It was put there for me to use. You missed the best part. You want to hear this?
No, I'll hear the tape later when I gotta deal with it.
Yeah. You have to hear it so that I can continue. Because you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. Okay. So anyway, that's the feeling I had when I first went to that meeting on Connecticut Avenue that first night with my first white chip. Was that had been put in my path, that this was, even though I had reached out and I had done the work to get there, that had been made available to me by my higher power. And so, in that respect, it was God-given. Well, a lot of people might say, well, you did it yourself, you made the phone calls and you found the information, but it really wasn't like that, because the will that got me there wasn't my own. And the will that, it's the same thing that happens on a daily basis. Like when I want a new couch, which happened the other day. I wanted a new couch for 6 months, and I went to visit a friend that I felt bad about because I hadn't visited her for a while, and she had just bought a new couch. So she gave me her old couch, which was brand new. And that's kind of like what I mean. A lot of times, stuff's just put there for me. Here, take it. And everything in my life was a choice like that. I mean, I didn't have to take it. It was my choice. It was a desirable choice. And that's the way my recovery is. It's always a choice. Today, the desirable choice for me is most often the right choice. Because I've learned that doing the right thing pays off. Feels so much better than doing what I want. And so that becomes a desirable choice for me. And, when I have my fears about the future, that's what I think about. The desirable choice and the fact that I've learned to have faith that tomorrow can't possibly be any worse than today. And that whatever happens tomorrow is what's going to happen tomorrow, and that I'll be there. As Mark says, the worst thing never ever happens. And that helps me a lot. I tell myself that when I'm scared. When I'm lonely. The phone rings. It saves me from myself. I don't like to talk about my dreams. I'm afraid of my dreams. I haven't worked that out yet. Why? I don't want to think that I'm afraid of success. I don't like to sabotage myself today, but I'm afraid of rejection, or I'm afraid of failures. I'm afraid of trying and failing. So I leave my dreams alone, because I don't think that I'd rather have them as a dream than as a failed reality. Because in fantasy, at least you can live on with it. Once it's real, for me, it's real. So I tend to face the facts when they're facts to be faced. I'm very happy. I like what I said about my higher power. You can print that. I don't know, I guess the last thing I really want to talk about is my family, which is something that's like a constant, it's like a little bee buzzing around in my helmet, stinging me on the face and stuff. And making me cry. I don't like to talk to them because they always upset me because they're so entrenched in it. They're so much of my past. They're the past for me, and the past is pretty bad. So when I call them, I tend to bring that up to it becomes present, and it becomes present through my recollection, but it also becomes present because they're still living in it. They're still living in that old behavior. And so what I'm working on today is just letting that go. I don't mean being irresponsible to my family. I'm always there for them if they need me, but I've stopped expecting anything from them. And today I don't desire, out of bitterness and anger, to get back at them by taking things from them. I'd much rather just give to them. It's kind of fun too because it shocks them that I can actually have a conversation with them and not like cut them out and freak out, and I can actually contribute, deal with them on an adult level. But that's rare. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. So I feel better when I just don't talk to them at all. I write them letters and tell them that everything's fine, and tell them my little successes of the day, and let them know that I care, but I can't let them in because they like set off a chain reaction of self-destructive feelings in me that are very hard for me to deal with. I don't know how to explain it. I've just come to the conclusion that I just need to leave them in the past and just go on, and they haven't supported me for 15 years. I don't know why I should get the illusion that they're going to support me today, emotionally or monetarily. I get some goofy ideas. When I got clean, I had this bizarre idea that I was supposed to be everything my family wanted me to be. And I tried to do that, and what I found out is that I'm supposed to be me. And that's not really what anybody wants except for me. And I guess that's my greatest gift today, is it's me. I've gotten that. It's kind of exciting.
I'm going to go pick up Mickey now.
Okay.